Hey friends, if you like the Nexus Podcast, the best way to continue the learning is to join our community. You can join the Nexus Pro membership. It's our global community of smart building professionals. We have monthly events, paywall deep dive content, and a private chat room, and it's just $35 a month. Finally, our marketplace is how we connect leading vendors with buyers looking for their solutions. The links are below in the show notes, and now let's go on to the podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Nexus Podcast, everybody. I'm Brad Bonavida. I have with me the founder of Nexus Labs, James. James, how you doing?
Hey, good morning. I'm good, thank you.
Great. And our guest today is Kelly Burke. Kelly Burke is a business technology consultant at JLL. She focuses on a very specific account. It's a very large enterprise client, which all of us know. Kelly, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing fantastic. As always, we want to remind anyone who's new here that if you are trying to figure out what Nexus Labs is, you're new to listening to the podcast, the best way to figure out everything we've got going on is to subscribe to our newsletter. It comes out every other Wednesday. It has a ton of information. It's the best way to stay up to date with all the things that we do. With that, we're going to jump into our At the Nexus section about what's going on at Nexus Labs before we dive into Kelly and all the things that she's working on. These are just some things that are going on within our community. James, why don't you kick us off? What's going on with you at Nexus?
Well, we're going to talk about one of them today, which is we're super focused right now on condition-based maintenance. I believe, Brad, you thought Kelly's presentation on condition-based maintenance was one of the best that you watched so far from NexusCon 2025. So we'll get into that in just a second. But what we're building up to is our April 15th Nexus Cast. It's a 3-hour event online that people can join. It's the second in the Nexus Cast series. And I'm excited about the format. We're making tweaks, and we talked about it in the last few episodes, so we don't get into it. But if you haven't heard the last few episodes, go register. It's in the links in the show notes. It's free for building owners and pro members, and $149 for everybody else.
We've kind of been building up on condition-based maintenance for a couple of podcasts and for like over a month now, leading up to Nexus Cast. And this one's going to be about condition-based maintenance as well. And then, James, you and I have been talking about next week, we're going to record the following podcast. We're going to try something a little new there where we're talking to Kelly about condition-based maintenance. We talked to Chris Lell about condition-based maintenance. We've gone through our 50 plus pieces of content that are condition-based maintenance. And James and I are going to come into the next podcast with both of our notes and try to hash this thing out with everything that we've learned about condition-based maintenance, which will hopefully help us distill kind of everything that needs to be in the introduction to that Nexus Cast event too. So looking forward to that one.
That'd be great.
Yeah. What about NexusCon?
I think that I've been having a lot of meetings with people around brainstorming. I have a couple this week, brainstorming what they're going to submit for an abstract. So we have a request for abstracts out. Anyone that wants to take the stage, as Kelly did last year, needs to submit an abstract by April 17th. And Brad, we have a pretty simple abstract form this year. We've simplified it even more, where it's basically just what is an obstacle that a lot of smart buildings programs have? How did you overcome that obstacle? And then how are you going to teach the audience at NexusCon how to overcome that obstacle in their smart buildings programs? And so what we're leaning into pretty heavily this year at NexusCon is we've always cut the fluff, but now we're going to kind of cut the context. We don't want someone to tell us about what FDD is or, tell us about the campus at the University of so-and-so, right? What we want you to do is teach a very specific thing that someone can take back to their own smart buildings programs. And so if that sounds like your jam, check out the form on the website.
Yeah. And it's, like you said, it's very simple to fill out. Like, we're trying to not intimidate people with like, oh, you've got to have this master plan and write us this like 4-page abstract of everything it's going to be about. Like, get your idea out there. You learned something, you want to teach it. We can help you figure out exactly how to frame it if you need, but we just want to see you submit and see what ideas of teachings that people have out there.
The other thing that's happening right now is about a quarter of the booths are taken, which means if you're a vendor listening to this and you have not reserved your booth, the best 25% of the booths are already grabbed. And I would say, just looking at our pipeline, the next 25% is about to be grabbed soon. So it's not like we're not trying to like overhype this, like the booths are going to sell out, but just like if you're going to sign up for Nexus Con as a vendor in August, you just should know that you're not going to get the booth that you want to get. And then when the demo stage schedule gets released, you're also not going to get the best pick of which demo slot you want. And so we hate hype, but that is a very real thing we do. It's first come, first serve. You get to choose your booth, and then you get to choose your demo slot. And if you're late, sorry.
Yeah. And one thing about, I can't remember if we've talked about this on the pod, but I'm really stoked about the layout of the booths this year, is that last year you have the marketplace where you can like walk into the marketplace and there's all the booths and like you can go either opt in of that or opt out of it. This year the booths are like the hallway of the whole event. So like you are always in the marketplace. You're walking through it. Where you get lunch is where the booths are. Where you get from one presentation to another is where the booths are. It's like very integrated into the whole experience. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And then the last thing before we get into Kelly is just, I'm really excited about our new website. We just launched it today. It's a lot easier for people to find content that's relevant to them. If you're an energy manager, facility manager, OT, we have different sections that really help curate like what content we have that's specific for you. So it looks really cool. Check it out if you haven't.
Just on the new website, it's not a new website. We just have a few new pages. I think we should point people towards the hub pages. So if you're an FM, for example, we have an FM hub now. And so everything related to transforming how maintenance and FM are done with technology is going to end up on that. So we've tagged all of our archive content. If it's related to FM, it's going to show up on that FM hub. We'll also be putting, more roadmap style materials for FMs to think about how smart buildings relate to specifically that department. Same thing for OT, same thing for energy, same thing for service providers. And so it's kind of how we're going to be building out the website from now on. So let us know what you think, everybody.
All right. With that, let's move on to get Kelly involved here. Kelly, this is a true story before you start, that while I was preparing for this, I did rewatch your recording on Nexus Pro. It's on our website. And literally the day I was watching it and like taking notes, I got an email from somebody who was like, hey, I was at NexusCon and I'm trying to work on this thing. Where do I find Kelly's presentation? Because I'm looking for some inspiration, which is crazy and goes to show how well you did. So thank you for presenting. It was fantastic. So why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about your work at JLL? What do you do? How long have you been there? What's your background? That type of stuff.
Yeah, thanks. And exciting to hear that people are following up on the presentation and finding value in it. So that's generally what I'm looking for, not only to, drive my clients, but also to help push the industry. And so glad to hear that. But for JLL, I have been here almost about 3 years at this point. I have what some might call a untraditional background. I actually started my career in fintech and then actually transferred to construction tech, and then finally have landed my way here in property tech, smart building worlds, whatever you choose to call it at this particular point. But I do think that that's actually created a very interesting lens for me to look at the industry with. I tend to find that because I have navigated through these very different industries, that it has really led me to find the people who are the actual experts and listen to those folks and help to sort of establish. I can't necessarily out engineer our engineers. They have decades more experience, but what I'm great at helping them to do is figuring out where they need assistance and how I can make them better at what they do by empowering them with the right tools.
Nice. And you work for JLL, you work on a specific client's account. How long have you been assigned to that one client, and what portfolio of buildings are you kind of responsible for of theirs?
Yeah, so I have been on the account as long as I have been at JLL. So pretty much, again, 3 years at this point. With the particular portfolio of buildings that we are looking at, it is office buildings comprised of owned and leased sites, campus sites, as well as individual owned sites. And then generally about 500 plus buildings, changes on that particular number, depending on who you're asking at that particular point in time, but also from a difference in the types of work that they support. Some areas being lab settings, some being television studios, recording studios. So there's a lot of variety in what's an office building there.
Sure. And are those all located in one place, or are they dispersed throughout the country?
Not only dispersed throughout the country, but also global.
Okay, great. And then I always think it's interesting with like specifically JLL employees to kind of understand the lay of the land a little bit. So can you describe in terms of like you're working with employees who are part of this enterprise company as well as JLL employees, and then you also have outsourced contractors, I imagine too. So like, and we'll get a little bit more into the roles, but like, how do those relationships kind of mesh together? Like, what does the team look like across those orgs?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And where I sit has been an additional layer of complexity there, just because I was not intended to be on this account and full time for 3 years, but has just worked out that way that we've been able to make good progress on what I've been working on. The general setup of the team that I sit on is entirely actual client folks, whereas I am the only contractor. But in that particular team, I do actually utilize our internal JLL Intelligent Operations Center, short is IOC, and they're the ones that are currently working on the FDD program from a technical and service standpoint. Prior to that, it was a mix of vendors that we had been working with, just ended up being the right cost and for the scaling needs that we had from a partnership perspective on the level that we were going there. But it's very mixed in how the teams operate. There are your leads on the real estate side that are generally all client based, and then mostly the site teams, which are a variety of JLL operators, as well as we have some folks that in different regions based on some differences in how the setup is there, and some changing client accounts that we have other folks that are also commercial real estate operators that we have to work with in addition. But generally, the client likes to keep out as many third-party operations as possible. So definitely very interesting that they try and pull a lot of what they can in-house, even from the tech perspective. So very, very unique setup, I think, from that particular lens.
So let's dive into the meat of what your NextCon presentation was about, which is this Nexus, or this FDD pilot that you kind of led. You kind of started out, you got the great meme, I've seen it before, of like where the customer asked for the swing on the tree and like what the designer thought, what the engineer thought, and what the VP thought. I love that look. But basically, it sounds like you have a lot of experience, or you've seen the pitfalls of a failed FDD pilot. You mentioned specifically like too many dashboards and using AI to like plug and play rules. What was your experience prior, like, how did you know about these pitfalls of FDD gone bad before you started this pilot?
So interestingly enough, this was my first pilot that I had run for FD&D, but where I had experience with identifying those pitfalls had been from my prior lives working at general contractors and doing uh, construction technology, where I was seeing the implementation of this technology not being done in a way that properly supported those on site to get their jobs done efficiently, as well as supply them with the right information and tools to get that job done. And so, while this had been my personal first foray into FD&D, not that it was a new concept by any means, it was something that it's a tale as old as time in any industry. I think we've seen, if you're not looking at the people in the process, then you're left with a hammer that nobody knows how to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you had pretty specific metrics that you were kind of being held to as you started this pilot. Like, I think they were more specific than we typically see with someone going into the pilot. Can you talk about those and like what you guys had defined as success before you started?
Yeah, so I actually had been brought on a little bit mid, we'll say, stream in terms of the startup of the program. So some of these things had been already agreed to upon prior to me joining the project with the particular metrics, but the client really wanted hard numbers of, is this something that will actually make us successful? Does it bring value? And they wanted to be able to not only show it in a very nice, neat package, but also across diverse conditions, different building types, essentially introducing as much diversity as we could into the actual results to say that not only is this something that we can replicate at one site, but something that we can replicate at other sites. Most of these general parameters that we ended up coming up with from a metrics standpoint for success evaluation came from the Lawrence Berkeley study that was done, I think, back in 2020, if I remember correctly. And so those were our general drivers to see. We had the hypothesis of, if we deploy this at buildings, are we able to achieve the industry agreed upon results seen there to show that this drives enough value for the customer to scale.
People don't talk very much, at least I haven't heard JLL talk very much about their FDD group and FDD offering. Can you talk about like what is their, how do they come into this? It sounds like they're using SkySpark, and then there's a team that has developed their own sort of JLL product. Is that something we can talk about publicly here?
Yeah. So the FD&D sort of offering, that is actually something as a result of this pilot and scaling effort with this particular client, we are actively working on refining. My team specifically is software agnostic. So we have that, I'll say, fortunate ability to be able to look at all of the tools available to us on the market from my particular team and recommend what is the right fit. For the pilot at the time, we didn't go with anything JLL related. We did end up establishing that SkySpark was going to be our method of choice, just because from a cost perspective, as well as some other parameters that the client had set, like being able to own their data, being able to create customizations, potentially utilizing the Haxel framework to establish their own version, and had the most ownership over analytic rule sets, as well as easy integration with other platforms. So that had been why we initially went with that, and to try and eliminate a lot of, we'll say, conflict of interest with going with an internal team to utilize SkySpark, because the JLL developed platform is developed on the SkySpark Haxel framework. And so it's called IntelliBuild, but we went completely third party otherwise. And it was just me acting in as that sort of technical program manager perspective. And we hired someone to come in as the vendor of the software to get everything set up, and then also to run the what I call experience and insights portion. So basically taking a look at the tickets generated, making sure that they were able to validate those conditions against the BMS, and so forth. But based on the results of that, that's why we ended up taking a broader look at the market from SkySpark perspective to see what the other offerings were out there from a cost and service perspective, and ended up going internal just because from that analysis, the client thought that it made the most sense to move forward in that capacity.
I want to fast forward to, you did a great job throughout your whole NexusCon presentation of kind of going through your entire condition-based maintenance playbook. James and I are writing the Nexus Labs version of the condition-based maintenance playbook right now. I was actually mapping them together. You obviously have a bunch of the same steps. What I thought was the most interesting part of your presentation is what we call step 7. James, we had 10 steps, and then we went down to 8, and now I think we have 9 steps. But step 7 in our process is establishing role ownership. And Kelly, you talk about how you mapped your role ownership, and you show a diagram that you have 26 functional roles that you're trying to map as you're developing this pilot. Kind of describe to the audience like what that means. What was that thing that you were building, and why were you building it?
Yeah, so that was a big lesson learned from the pilot. We had what we needed to do from a resourcing standpoint to run, but when we were thinking of what would it take to support this in scale, utilizing that lessons learned to essentially establish what would have made this easier had we had someone in this particular role fulfilling this particular need. And so I think I've heard people initially say 26 roles, that's a lot. It is. It's not necessarily 26 headcount. Some of it does scale, I would say, with your program maturity as well as the square footage that you are working through. But a lot of it can be absorbed by a singular headcount if done correctly, based on that particular person's experience and also their just bandwidth. So there's a ton of roles that I did end up saying that are necessary. And really where this came from was just to find where we can make a program very smooth from establishing what do we need to have from a site inventory standpoint, and understand what we have from a back of house network setup to the ins and outs of working with some particular types of BMSs and the controller types, along with the different protocols, as well as being able to take the insights that are being produced and take those to the next level, and essentially create that root cause identification and steps for remediation, and take that and resolve them, and being generally still operating in that spot of the site teams going to do what they do best, and work on their buildings and make them run well and make their occupants happy.
One of the roles that I hear people talk about in condition-based maintenance, like most often, is I call it the FDD super user, or the condition-based maintenance super user, where if you just are releasing the platform and you've got these new work orders coming out that are more condition-based rather than like reactive-based, maybe you assign it to just one person who has the ability to kind of triage those and focus on those, so you're not overwhelming the rest of the team who's got to focus on what was already in the backlog. Is that one of your roles? Did you have like a single person who was kind of focused on these, closing out these tickets to begin with?
Yes. So that I call it something slightly different, but essentially the same thing, where I call it the FD&D insights and validation role. That person that's essentially managing that fault queue, because faults are not a one-to-one situation necessarily with tickets. Not that they can't be, but with appropriate, roll up in terms of your logic and whatnot to create those and push those into tickets. But essentially, that role is indispensable. And I think it's something that a lot of people think that their site teams are immediately ready to operate in. And that is not against the question whether or not we have folks that are on site that have the wherewithal to be able to look at this time series data and interpret trends and put in the best root cause as well as remediation, and being able to validate those findings against the BMS as well as against the actual conditions after resolution, and ensure that it was resolved, and taking a look and potentially adjusting down the line. But a lot of them do not have the time to do that right now. We are in a space that most of these buildings are being handed over post-commissioning, that are not fully commissioned and are not operating at design. And we don't even have a solidified baseline. We are losing folks that have come up in both engineering and the trades with those knowledge sets that want to be in these positions, and we're losing a lot of that level of intelligence. And these folks are having to do a lot more with less. And so a lot of times it's a time perspective. And this is just someone that understands the ability to ingest and analyze data and be that eyes in the sky view, versus giving the site teams that ability to continue to be the boots on the ground, do what they do best, and resolve issues within their buildings. And so that's definitely a focus where I think a lot of people, when setting up a fault detection program, they think, oh, we're producing insights. The site teams will be able to understand those and action them and act upon them. And it's going to be, just easy peasy, lemon squeezy. But it takes a bit more than that. And this is a new role. This is a new type of engineering. And we need to look at it in this lens. As any new technology creates, new roles for any particular industry. So,
can you talk about specifically how, like, what are the roles that existed before? I feel like sometimes people approach this as kind of like a bolt-on. Like, there are roles that didn't exist before. You're adding like your role and a team, like the insights person you said, you're adding those roles onto the maintenance organization, bolting them on. But there are roles that were there before that are now changing. Can you talk about like the roles that are changing and how they're changing specifically?
yeah, and that was something that I wanted to make sure that I was changing for the better, and not making these roles uh, develop any sort of negative feelings towards the implementation of this. It's a combination of new roles, and then integrating the tool into the existing roles and their workflows. So the site teams and the site engineering part of that deep integration was sitting down with them and understanding what their current workflow structure is like, and what systems they need to interact with on a daily basis, and how they generally go out when they receive a we'll say reactive, too hot, too cold ticket. Walk me through how you're doing that and what information that you utilize and how you go about that. What are you doing generally for your proactive maintenance? How are you attacking issues like that? And so um, the really important part is to not only think about these new roles and the fact that they need to exist, but also making sure you're not neglecting the old roles, because those folks are going to be the huge drivers of value in the program and the ones that are actually going to be uh, taking ownership of utilizing the insights and creating the value from remediating these particular issues that you're identifying.
You mentioned at the beginning, multiple building automation systems, multiple IoT platforms. There's a lot of stuff this comes from. How did you think about that kind of satellite role, is what I'll call it, of like, sometimes it lives in IT departments, or the person who's responsible for like integration and making sure that from all these disparate sources, the correct signals are getting to this centralized platform for people to use? Was that an IT role, or who's responsible for getting that all to the single source of truth?
Well, oftentimes we found that it's a no one role. A lot of these back of house networks are incredibly neglected, and not only does IT not want to touch them, they do not know how. Uh, a lot of our scaling effort actually involved me taking on a more technical hat where I've been helping to uh, basically remediate MSTP trunk communication issues. And not that I do not know how to do that, but definitely not the main focus of my role and where I'm supposed to be, dedicating a lot of my time. But you're going to see a lot of those issues and gaps from a long-term perspective, and that's something that we're working on remediating as we scale, to have folks that have some of that more technical communication knowledge. But I would say even on the idea of BMS vendors and folks who are working in the FD&D space, from creating those connectors in the BMS product, there is a little bit of that, we'll say, gap between how those folks communicate and some of the communication of resolving those issues. Part of, again, why I had to step in, some technical challenges that neither seem to know how to overcome, because it's just been such a neglected part of our industry. And so I would say it's a big effort that kind of spans a few roles right now, just in the way that it's occurred. But definitely having someone that is specifically dedicated to operational technology, in my opinion, it's a whole separate ballpark and new set of roles. I've heard people from a network perspective saying that these seem to sometimes invalidate general best practices from a network perspective, and operate in a way that doesn't seem feasible. So it's definitely, even from a traditional network perspective, throwing some people for a loop in that area.
Yeah.
I got one more question,
Brad.
Brad. People should check out the recording to look at Kelly's slides, specifically around this like flow chart. There's like a start in the upper left. I think it says start. And then it goes into everybody's roles. It's like a swim lane flow chart. And one of the areas, it's really, really well done. And it's almost like this is required. So Brad, when we write the playbook, like that diagram is 100% required for you to implement condition-based maintenance. It basically looks at what's the role of the BMS provider, what's the role of the FDD provider, what's the role of the CMMS in this case, right? And then what's the role of the there's even a reporting layer that you have in this graphic, Kelly. One of the things I'm wondering is how people don't talk enough about how the role should change of the BMS vendor. So if you guys think about globally, all these different BMS providers, all these different contractors locally. How do you guys change, or how will you, as you roll this out, change their roles? And is it contractually changing them, or is it simply just changing where they get their priorities from?
I think it's a combination. I think there will be a lot more work in a good way for BMS vendors to do. And I think sometimes, especially in these scaling efforts that I've done along with the pilot, there's some initial hesitancy on what's being done here. Opening up the curtain and seeing what's behind can be a little bit scary. And uh, the great thing about this, though, and the best way to work through that with them is we're actually giving you a bigger piece of the pie because let's face it, we all know that we're not running buildings optimally right now. If someone shows me something that's operating to design right now, I would love to see it. And this is not I don't believe you, more just I really want to see one. And so that's, they know that there's a lot of work to be done. And until we get it to a baseline, we can't really optimize. And there's going to be, sequences that need to be rewritten. I've seen quite a few PID loops that are not operating in a manner that are ideal, but a lot of that is client request and pushback from them. And I think this will also enable them with more information to properly, write these sequences of operation in the BMS and do more and get more of the piece of the puzzle and being able to utilize some of those lessons learned for some of their other clients too. So I think it changes in the sense that they're going to be a little bit hesitant. They're going to feel like they're potentially at first, going to get scolded because there's information here. But I would say for most building operators' perspectives, they understand that. And I think it's more of a working with a good FD&D program manager and program, they're going to make sure that that is well communicated, and that we're giving those BMS operators information to be successful at what they do.
One thing I really liked about your presentation was that you actually shared like very concrete results, which we're always trying to get people to do. Quick, summary for the audience, and correct me if I get anything wrong, but you had 3 buildings for the pilot, then you knocked it down to 2. The goal was 10% energy savings and 10% operational maintenance savings. You hit 18% energy savings, so check there, but you hit 1.5% maintenance savings. And I thought you were really you had a lot of humility in the way you explained that. So maybe explain why that was low. And then also I'd like to ask you, would you recommend that someone who's starting a pilot in condition-based maintenance would even use operational maintenance savings as a target metric for it? Why or why wouldn't you recommend that to somebody?
Can I add a follow-up, which is also, how did you calculate operational savings? How does that even show up as a metric?
Yeah, so I will say that was, I think, even going into this, a metric that gave especially the property management and facility management teams a little bit of pause, just because 10% operational maintenance savings oftentimes sounds like a reduction in headcount. And that's not what it should be looking at all. It should be really looking at how are we empowering our operators to be able to do their work more efficiently. I would say it's not a metric that I would say you need to completely abandon, but I don't think it's as critical for the measure of success of a program, especially because a reduction in force, unless absolutely necessary, is not what the intent of a fault detection program should be. And honestly, I don't think these metrics should be utilized for that in any capacity. Those should be some separate conversations that come down more so to portfolio management and, overall needs there. But these operators are doing so much with so little. And so really more so when we were looking at the operational savings, we were evaluating against similar ticket types in terms of what it would have taken to resolve the particular issue prior without the root cause and remediation included with that, and essentially taking that hourly rate for the engineering team and reducing that. We did look at also potentially including some more, we'll say, theoretical type metrics as well included in that, where we were like, well, they're able to do things more efficiently, so maybe now we can pull back some contracts from, we'll say, one of the ones we kept joking about was the bench painting budget for the campus, because they'll have a little bit more time to do things that we had to sub out versus, things that were more focused on the operational effectiveness of the building. So overall, in that, I think that was a great lessons learned too, to really just say this isn't the key driver of value, and it was something good to learn. But I think too, people look at that so much with that negative lens of like reduction in force, and that's not what this is intended to be and shouldn't. And so if you're including it, I think it should be a very like more fact of the matter like situation there. But it's really difficult to calculate, and we want it to be as rooted in reality as possible with regards to like cost savings. So even with energy savings, we were very fact of the matter and not theoretical in those assumptions that we were doing. We wanted to make sure that was clear across the board.
I feel like we hear this every time someone deploys FDD. Just in terms, like, my hot take is that you just have to root it in energy savings, because every time someone starts to talk about the like operational maintenance savings or like pushing back capital allocation to have to buy new equipment or something, it gets so abstract that you just would be getting into an argument in a meeting about what's real and what's not real. And if your condition-based maintenance program isn't heavily rooted in energy savings, which is actually like verifiable, you're going to struggle to get everybody on the same page. That's what it seems like.
That was a great point. That was something that we had looked at too. And we were like, we know if a piece of equipment is now running correctly, of course it will last longer, but it's really difficult to say how long it will actually last. And so the utility savings from a financial perspective were the huge driver and the most concrete thing to go forth with and root in reality for that value.
I like totally disagree with what you guys are saying right now, but we don't have time. We don't have time to dig into it. People are going to have to come to our event where I will talk in more detail, or we'll do it in the next podcast. But yeah, I just totally disagree with you right now. But let's move on.
You're going to leave us on that?
Yep.
You're not going to give us the...
Yeah.
Okay. Before we go to carve-outs, you get 30 seconds, Kelly. If you had to give somebody advice who is just about to start their FDD program and go through something similar to you, what would be the 30-second advice for them?
My advice would be listen, then implement. You're not going to have a successful program without heavily investing in the teams that will be the operational driver of the program. So those site teams, facilities management, property management, working with your sustainability teams, really figuring out how they work. That is where your true value is going to be driven and how you're going to implement this successfully. A lot of the fault detection programs out there in the market right now, they're all, a lot of them are fantastic. And generally, though, the value that you're going to be able to extract from them is going to be similar. They might not be happy with me saying that, but ultimately the success of whatever fault detection program that you're implementing with that is going to be the value in that workforce and how you're aligning it with the resourcing needs and the processes that exist today. And you'll be able to take whatever platform you choose to varying levels of success.
Sure. All right, great. With that, let's close out with some carve outs here. Based on the randomness of the bullet points I put down the sheet, I go first this week. My carve out is this fun, silly thing that I do with two of my neighbors who are friends of mine. We have a local newspaper called the Mountain Mail. John gets the Mountain Mail. He does the Sudoku, and then he leaves it on my front porch where there's two crosswords, and I do one of the crosswords. And then I leave it on Ashley and Clark's front porch where they get to do the last crossword. So they get to see how everyone did. John gets to see how no one did. I get to see how John did on the Sudoku. But I realized that now I'm not supporting the Mountain Mail because we're literally recycling their newspaper 3 times rather than getting 3 subscriptions. So I am going to make a small donation this year to make up for the fact that I don't actually subscribe but get the newspaper. All right, Kelly, your turn.
That's funny.
I am just going to be starting what I call concert season this weekend, so I'm very excited for that. Music is my calm. Going to see a smaller indie rock band called Alex Sucks on Sunday, so ready for that. And then I think I have a concert for almost every 2 to 3 weeks thereafter. So yeah. That's big thing I spend most of my hard-earned money on is concerts and food.
Nice. Great. I don't think I have any shows booked right now. That's a good reminder. All right, I'm gonna go do 2. I'm gonna cheat. The first one is we got an email from someone when we announced that the conference is going to be in Detroit this year with basically poo-pooing Detroit, and I just want to say I've been twice this year, and I'm excited to go back again, even before the conference. People should not sleep on Detroit. It's absolutely a really, really, really cool downtown. And there's Shinola watches, which is like really, really cool. They even have their own Shinola hotel down there. All the sports stadiums are like super close. And then what's cool, what I think is cool is the architecture. So people will just want to walk around downtown. And what's cool about Detroit for NexusCon is we have Bedrock Properties that's going to be doing a downtown walking tour for everyone on Monday. And so maybe not everyone, we'll have to qualify that. But some of the people will get to go on a downtown walking tour with Bedrock, and they own 80-something% of the buildings downtown. And so we're going to have a little bit of a VIP tour of the coolest parts of Detroit. And so I just want to say, don't sleep on it. Also, don't send us mean emails about where we pick our conference location. That's also not.
Hey, I couldn't agree more. I freaking love Detroit. I thought it was so fun, and I'm super excited to go back.
Yeah.
Everything about it is great. It's fun.
That's where my husband's from. So can confirm. Great spot, and happy to pass along some weird little bars that his dad loves going to.
Yeah, great. We're going to have a little guide to Detroit as well. The 3 hotels we're choosing for the conference are also awesome. The Shinola Hotel, the Book Hotel, which is a historic building, National Historic Register, all that. My second carve out is that my fiance got me this huge water bottle because she doesn't think I drink enough water. So if you're watching on YouTube, it's like the size of my head. And I'm super behind today, as I have been every day since she got me this, on drinking enough water. But it's a good method.
How many ounces? How many ounces is it?
It's 64. And so her prescription was that I need to drink the 64 while I'm at the office. And then I need to drink another 64 while I'm at home.
And that's too much water.
That's a gallon. When you live in Boulder, man, it's very dry here. So she's trying to take care of me.
Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to hopefully seeing you at the next NexusCon, and have a great rest of your week.
Hey, thanks, guys. It was awesome being on.
Okay, friends, thank you for listening to this episode. As we continue to grow our global community of changemakers, we need your help. For the next couple of months, we're challenging our listeners to share a link to their favorite Nexus episode on LinkedIn with a short post about why you listen. It would really, really help us out. Make sure to tag us in the post so we can see it. Have a good one.